Finals week for freshman English, huh? Yeah, I know it can be a little bit stressful, but hey, no worries. We're here to help. We're going to do a deep dive into your exam review, and you're going to feel so much better afterward.
We've got this PowerPoint right here. We're going to break it all down, give you some great examples. Hopefully, we'll have a few aha moments along the way.
Yeah. Think of this as like your cheat sheet, I guess, to acing that exam. Maybe even falling a little in love with language along the way.
Absolutely. Let's start with sentences. The foundation of it all.
Okay, sentences. I mean, that's pretty basic stuff, right?
It is. It is. But going back to the basics can sometimes unlock a whole new understanding, a whole new level.
I hear you. I'm totally with you on that. Sometimes it's the simplest things that are actually the most profound.
Yeah.
So sentences, what makes them work? What makes them tick?
Well, every sentence, no matter how simple or complex it is, needs two things: a subject and a predicate.
Right, subject and predicate. Can you remind us what those are?
Yeah, so think of the subject like the star of the show, the one that's doing the action or maybe just being.
Yeah.
It's who or what the sentence is about. The predicate is the action itself. It's what the subject is doing or being.
So like that cat meme, I can has cheeseburger, I would be the subject, and can has would be the predicate.
Exactly. And, your PowerPoint even breaks it down further. Simple subject, simple predicate, complete predicate.
Right, right. Yeah, it's all coming back to me. What's the difference though? Does it really matter that much?
It does. Think of it like this. The simple subject is that core noun or pronoun at the heart of the sentence. And then the complete subject, that's where you include all the descriptive words and phrases. Gives you more information about it.
So in that PowerPoint example, two brothers by the names of Sven and Ole are characters in many Norwegian jokes. The simple subject is just brothers.
You got it. And the complete subject would be that whole phrase, two brothers by the names of Sven and Ole. So much richer.
Okay. Okay. Now, what about the simple and complete predicates?
Can you guess those?
Let me see. I think the simple predicate would be just the verb. So are, right? And then the complete predicate would be are characters in many Norwegian jokes.
You nailed it. See? Those complete versions just give us so much more nuance.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between a rough sketch and a fully painted portrait.
Okay. Yeah. I'm seeing the difference now. So why does this matter? Why should we care about this difference? Is it just about being like grammatically correct? Or is there something more to it?
It's about clarity. It's about precision and style. When you really understand the difference between simple and complete subjects and predicates, your sentences, they're not just grammatically correct, they're well-structured, they're engaging. You can choose to emphasize certain elements. You can provide more context and detail. It's like having the right tool for the job.
Right. So once we understand subjects and predicates, we can start to, like, play around with sentence structure, really make our writing shine.
Exactly. It's like having the blueprint for a house. Once you have that, you can start to add all the architectural details.
I love that analogy. Okay, so we've got our foundation, we've got our subjects, we've got our predicates. What's the next layer of our writing house?
It's parts of speech. They're the building blocks of every sentence, the words that we use to express ourselves.
Okay, time to break out the grammar toolkit then. Nouns, verbs, adjectives, all that good stuff.
The whole crew. But we're not just going to list them, are we?
No, we're going to do a little deeper than that.
Exactly. We're going to explore how they work together, create meaning. And your PowerPoint has these really great questions that can help us understand the role of each part of speech.
Like, for adjectives, it asks, what kind?
Right.
Right, so if we go back to that example with the two brothers, Norwegian would be an adjective because it tells us what kind of jokes they're in.
Exactly. For verbs, it's what's the action?
Yeah.
Are, the verb, because it tells us what they're doing, just being characters in those jokes.
Okay. Nouns are things, verbs are actions, adjectives describe things, and then there's those tricky prepositions.
Oh, yeah. Prepositions. They can be tricky, but they're essential. They show the relationships between words in a sentence.
I remember trying to memorize all the prepositions. On, in, at, under, over, so many. But is there a way to make them less intimidating?
There is. The PowerPoint has this great trick. It's not a preposition unless it's followed by an object. Remember that, and prepositions become a lot less scary.
Okay. The not a preposition unless rule. I like it. So how does that work in practice?
Okay, so let's say you have the sentence, the book is on the table. On is the preposition, table is the object. On the table, that's the prepositional phrase, and it tells us where the book is.
I see. So, okay, why is this rule so important? How does it make us better writers?
Well, first of all, it helps us avoid those dreaded dangling prepositions. Those can make our writing sound really awkward. But more importantly, it helps us craft these really precise and stylish sentences.
Okay, so it's not just about being grammatically correct. It's about using prepositions in a more strategic way to create a richer style.
Yeah, exactly. And once you start to really pay attention to prepositions, you'll see them everywhere. Books, movies, songs, everyday conversations.
I have a feeling I'm going to be like obsessed with prepositions now. But before I spiral down that rabbit hole, let's move on to the next section of the PowerPoint. What's after prepositions?
It's complements. And this is where things get really interesting.
Complements. I vaguely remember this from class. They have something to do with verbs, right? And there's like all these different
Oh, you're
types.
right. They're all about verbs.
Yeah.
And they complete the meaning of the verb.
Okay, I think I kind of remember that. But the PowerPoint, it mentions predicate adjectives, predicate nominatives, direct objects, indirect objects. There's a lot of terminology here.
There is, don't worry. Think of complements like pieces of a puzzle. They all fit together to create this complete picture. The verb is the frame, and the complements are all the pieces that fill in those gaps.
Okay, I like that. So how do all these different types of complements fit into that puzzle?
Well, the PowerPoint has this really helpful diagram. It shows us how each type of complement answers a different question about the verb. Let's take a look.
All right, I'm looking at this diagram and yeah, okay, this is starting to make sense. Each complement has like a specific job, right? It's telling us something different about the verb. Like predicate adjectives, they answer what about a linking verb, is that right?
Exactly. And remember, linking verbs like is, am, are, was, were, those connect the subject to a word or phrase that either describes or renames it.
So in that sentence, the music is loud. Loud would be the predicate adjective because it's describing the music.
Perfect. And then a predicate nominative that renames the subject also after a linking verb.
Right. So my brother is musician. Musician would be the predicate nominative because it's renaming brother.
You got it. Now let's look at direct objects. Those answer what or whom after an action verb.
Okay, so they're receiving the action. Like the musician played the guitar. So guitar would be the direct object.
Exactly, because that's what was played.
And indirect objects, those answer to whom or for whom.
Right. So the musician gave the audience a thrilling performance. Audience is the indirect object there.
Because they're the ones who received the performance.
Yes. And the PowerPoint makes a really good point here. When you have an indirect object, there's a specific word order that we use in English. Subject, verb, indirect object, direct object.
So it's like musician gave audience performance. It follows the pattern.
Exactly.
Yep.
See, it's like a little grammar dance.
Yeah.
Now, why do you think it's important to understand all these different types of complements? It seems like pretty technical grammar stuff.
Yeah. I guess, like, on a basic level, it helps us to make sure that our sentences are grammatically correct. But is there a bigger picture here?
There is. When you master complements, it's like you're leveling up your writing skills. It's about crafting meaning, not just putting words together.
So you're saying, like, if you choose the right type of complement, you can emphasize different parts of the sentence, you can create different effects.
Exactly. You can make your sentences more dramatic, informative, even humorous. You're not just using a hammer and nails, you've got a whole set of tools to build with.
I like that. So it's not just about being correct. It's about having more control, being able to express yourself better.
That's it. Complements, they're not just about rules, they're about possibilities.
I am officially impressed by compliments now. Okay, so feeling pretty good about our grammar knowledge. What's next?
Well, let's zoom out a little bit. From all of this nitty-gritty grammar stuff,
Yeah.
let's talk about different types of writing,
Okay.
specifically nonfiction.
Nonfiction. Okay, so we're talking about the stuff that explores, like, the real world.
Exactly. In all its complexity.
I mean, nonfiction, that's a pretty broad category, right? Everything from biographies to essays to news articles.
You're absolutely right. It's a huge category. And your PowerPoint gives a nice little overview of some common types. Biographies, essays, speeches, letters, even diaries.
Right, so we've got all these different forms of nonfiction. But what makes them unique? I mean, a biography and a persuasive speech. Those are both nonfiction, but they have very different goals, right?
Yeah. And that's what's so fascinating about nonfiction. Each type has its own set of tools and techniques. A biography that aims to capture a person's life objectively. You rely on facts and anecdotes. A persuasive speech that tries to move an audience to action uses strong arguments, appeals to emotions.
So if we understand the purpose of the writing, that helps us to understand why the writer is making certain choices. Like, why are they using this kind of evidence? Why are they structuring their argument this way?
Exactly. And that's what makes you a more critical reader. You start to see those intentions.
Okay, so it's like being a detective.
Yeah,
You're looking for clues. You're trying to figure out the bigger picture.
exactly. And your PowerPoint even mentions a few specific readings. St. Charles Borromeo, Single Room, Earth View, and A Celebration of Grandfathers. Do you think those might be examples of different types of nonfiction?
I think so. I mean, St. Charles Borromeo, that sounds like a biography, right? And then Single Room Earth View. That could be an essay, maybe like a personal essay.
Possibly.
And A Celebration of Grandfathers. That sounds like it could be a reflective essay, maybe about like family and heritage.
Yeah, it could be. And by looking at those examples, we can see how those different types of nonfiction work in practice. They
Mm.
each have their own way of shaping the real world into words.
Right. Okay. So we've explored the foundations of sentences, delved into parts of speech, and now we've surveyed the landscape of nonfiction. I'm feeling pretty well equipped here. What's next? What's next on our journey?
Literary devices, the secret weapon of every writer.
Okay. Literary devices. I always found them a little bit intimidating. They sound so fancy and complicated.
I know, but they're really not that scary. Literary devices are just techniques that writers use to create specific effects. They can make their writing more vivid, more emotional, more engaging.
So they're like spices. They add flavor to the writing.
Exactly. They make it more complex and satisfying.
Okay, I like that. So the PowerPoint has like a whole list of literary devices. Should we go through all of them?
Well, we could, but maybe let's just focus on a few key ones that are likely to show up on the exam. How about illusion, metaphor, and parallelism?
Okay, yeah, those are good ones. Those sound familiar. Let's start with illusions. What's an illusion again?
An allusion is a reference to something well-known, like maybe a book, a historical event, a famous person. And writers use them to connect their work to something bigger, something more meaningful.
So, like in A Christmas Carol, when Dickens mentions the parable of the Good Samaritan, that would be an illusion, right?
Yes, exactly. He's inviting us to compare Scrooge to those characters in the parable, suggesting that Scrooge is also turning away from someone in need.
Okay. So it adds another layer to the story, right? It's like he's winking at us saying, hey, remember this. Let's think about how it connects. What about metaphors?
Metaphors, those are figures of speech. They create a direct comparison between two unlike things, but they're suggesting that they share some underlying similarity.
Right, right. So if we said the classroom was a zoo, that's a metaphor. It's not really a zoo, but it's suggesting that it was chaotic and noisy.
Perfect example. And actually, in Single Room Earth View, one of the readings that your PowerPoint mentions, Sally Ride, she writes, "The Earth's atmosphere is a thin, fragile veil."
Ooh, that's a good one.
That's a metaphor. It's highlighting how vulnerable our atmosphere is.
Yeah. It's not just a scientific description. It's an image that makes you feel something, you know?
Exactly. It makes you feel the fragility of our planet. Okay, now parallelism. Remember that.
Vaguely.
Parallelism is all about creating a sense of balance and rhythm in the writing. It's using similar grammatical structure in a series of words, phrases, or clauses.
So like, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil.
Yes, perfect. Each phrase has the same structure, makes it memorable, impactful. And think about Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. He uses parallelism so brilliantly throughout that speech.
I love that speech.
One really powerful example. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day.
Wow. The repetition of together there is so powerful.
Right. It emphasizes that unity, that collective action. It gives the whole speech this incredible sense of momentum. That's the power of parallelism.
Okay. Metaphors create those vivid comparisons, allusions tap into our shared knowledge, and then parallelism that adds rhythm and emphasis.
Got it.
But how do we actually use all of this, like, when we're analyzing a text?
That is a great question, and that leads us perfectly into the next section of your PowerPoint. Short stories, a news story application. This is where you put all those skills to work.
Okay, so it sounds like the exam is going to give us a short story that we haven't seen before.
It might.
But we've got all these tools now.
You do.
We can be literary detectives.
Exactly.
But, like, what kind of clues should we be looking for?
Think about everything that we've talked about today. Subjects and predicates, parts of speech, complements, prepositions. All of those elements, they contribute to the meaning.
Okay, so we need to break down the sentences. We need to see how they're working. But what about the bigger picture? Like, what about the themes, the characters, the plot?
That's where those literary devices come in. When you see an allusion, a metaphor, a really strong example of parallelism, don't just identify it. Ask yourself why the author chose to use it. What effect are they creating? How does it connect to the theme?
So we're not just reading the story, we're like having a conversation with the author.
Exactly. We're trying to understand their choices.
Okay. I'm ready to channel my inner Sherlock Holmes here. But before we go to the final frontier, A Christmas Carol, there's one more section in this PowerPoint that I think we should probably talk about.
Capitalization and punctuation.
I knew you were going to say that. Those little details, they always trip me up.
I know, I know. But they can make a big difference. And your PowerPoint does highlight a few key rules that you should definitely watch out for.
Okay, let's hear them. Let's do it.
Let's start with capitalization. Remember those tricky titles?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes they're in quotation marks, sometimes they're italicized. It's hard to keep track.
Here's the trick. Think. Short works get quotation marks, longer works get italicized.
So, like The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, that would be in quotation marks. And Moby Dick by Herman Melville would be italicized.
Yes, exactly. Short works that go in those little containers, the longer works they get to stretch out with the italics.
Okay, I can remember that. What else? What other capitalization rules are important?
Make sure you're capitalizing the names of ships, boats, and aircraft, like the Titanic. And remember that school subjects, those are generally not capitalized, unless they're language classes or course names that have a number in them.
So, history wouldn't be capitalized, but French and Physics 101 would be.
You got it. You're a capitalization champion. Now, let's talk about commas. I know they can be tricky, but they're essential.
Commas are like my nemesis. I never know where they're supposed to go.
I hear you. But your PowerPoint, it does call out a few comma rules that are especially important, like using commas with those conjunctive adverbs, things like however, therefore, consequently.
Right. So, like, I wanted to go to the party. However, I had to study for my English exam. Do I put the comma before however or after?
When you're using a conjunctive adverb to connect two independent clauses, you need a semicolon before the conjunctive adverb and a comma after it. So your example, that's perfect.
Okay. Try to remember that. I'm going to need to practice that one a few times.
Practice always helps. And remember, grammar. It's not just about following rules, it's about respecting your readers. When you use punctuation carefully, you're making your writing so much easier to read and understand.
Yeah, I like that. It's not about avoiding those red marks. It's about being a thoughtful writer.
Exactly. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. From the tiniest comma to the grandest metaphor, feeling ready to conquer this exam.
I think so, yeah. But there's still that final challenge, right?
The one and only, A Christmas Carol.
Time to get our Scrooge on.
This is more than just a holiday story. It's a masterpiece that explores so many profound themes. Redemption, social justice, the true meaning of human connection. And your PowerPoint, it's a great guide.
Okay. So what kind of questions should we be prepared for?
First of all, make sure you know the plot, you know the characters. The PowerPoint emphasizes knowing the key figures in each stave, the locations, Scrooge visits with each ghost, and why those places are important.
Okay. So like stave one, we've got Scrooge, we've got Bob Cratchit, we've got Jacob Marley's ghost. And the main locations are like Scrooge's counting house and his home.
Exactly. Now, as you go through the story, pay really close attention to the descriptions of those four ghosts. Marley, the ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, the ghost of Christmas yet to come. Each one has a unique personality and purpose.
Right, like Marley is all chained and tormented, right? But then the ghost of Christmas present is all jolly and festive. And the ghost of Christmas yet to come, that one's just like shrouded and silent, super creepy.
And those descriptions, those aren't just random details, They're symbolic. Marley's chains represent the burden of his past greed. The ghost of Christmas yet to come, that represents the fear of the unknown.
Okay. So understanding the symbolism of the ghosts, that helps us to understand the bigger message.
Exactly. And then think about the locations Scrooge visits with each ghost. Why do you think Dickens chose those specific places? What did they say about Scrooge's past, his present, his potential future.
Yeah, they are. It's like Scrooge's childhood school, right? That
Yeah,
makes you think about innocence, kind of like lost innocence. But then you've got the Cratchit family's home, and that shows you the difference between wealth and poverty.
exactly. And notice how Dickens uses all these like vivid images and sensory details to bring those places to life. He wants us to feel the cold, to smell the roasting goose, to hear the laughter at the Fezziwig party.
It's like he's creating this whole world, and we can step right into it.
Yeah. And through Scrooge, we experience the whole range of human emotions.
Okay. Speaking of big questions, what are some of the big themes that Dickens is dealing with in A Christmas Carol? The PowerPoint, it doesn't like explicitly list them, but it kind of hints at them throughout.
Well, one big theme is redemption, right?
Hmm.
Scrooge starts out as this miserly, isolated man, but through the ghosts, he gets this second chance, a chance to become a better person.
Right. It's like a classic transformation story.
Yeah,
And it's so hopeful. It shows that it's never too late to change.
exactly. And that theme of redemption, that's really tied to another big theme, compassion, generosity.
Yeah.
Dickens is saying something about our responsibility to each other, to help those who are less fortunate.
Yeah, those scenes with the Cratchit family, especially Tiny Tim, those are so powerful.
Right. They show us that even the smallest acts of kindness can make a difference.
It's amazing how a story that's like over 175 years old can still feel so relevant today.
I know. We're still dealing with those same issues. Wealth inequality, social justice, the importance of connecting with each other.
It's the mark of a truly great book. It speaks to everyone, no matter what time period you're in.
Okay. I think we've covered just about everything from that PowerPoint. Feeling pretty good about this exam now.
I think you're going to do great. You've got a good grasp of the material.
Well, that's thanks to you. You've been an awesome guide.
It's been my pleasure. But remember, the learning doesn't stop here, right? Keep exploring.
So where can you go from here? Well, now that you've got these basic concepts down, seek out some other resources. Read more short stories, more novels. Maybe even try writing some of your own stories.
Yeah. And don't just limit yourself to books. Pay attention to how these literary devices are being used in movies and TV shows and song lyrics. They're everywhere. Yeah. The world is full of stories. So remember, this exam, it's just a snapshot. The real learning, that happens when you keep exploring.
Exactly. And never stop asking questions.
That's some great advice. Well, that's a wrap for us. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into freshman English. We'll catch you next time on another deep dive.